Hello and welcome to Umbral Dread. Before we begin, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you enjoy slow, unsettling stories that quietly draw you beyond the light and deeper into the shadows, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, get comfortable. Let your body grow still and allow the sounds of the outside world to gently fade into silence. Tonight, the darkness has a story to tell, one that has been waiting just beyond the edge of the light. So close your eyes, listen carefully, and let yourself descend into umbral dread. Story 1, I live in an apartment building on the edge of town. It is old, cheap, and tired in the way old buildings get when no one really takes care of them anymore. The hallway carpet smells damp, no matter how often the landlord says he had it cleaned. The paint near the stairs has been chipped for years. The lights in the entrance flicker when it rains, and the elevator works only when it feels like it. The walls are thin too. Thin enough that I know most of my neighbors better by sound than by face. The couple above me argue almost every evening. I know the sound of their footsteps before the shouting starts. The old man next door watches television at all hours, and I can always tell when he has fallen asleep because the volume stays high but the channels stop changing. The woman below me plays piano. Badly, it is always the same song, or at least the same few pieces of a song, repeated over and over again. She never gets it right. She always stops before the ending, starts again, makes the same mistake, and keeps going. I have lived here for 3 years. It is not a good place, but it is cheap. The landlord does not bother me, and that counts for a lot. I work nights, so my life runs backward compared to everyone else in the building. I usually sleep during the day and stay awake at night, when most people are quiet. For a while, that arrangement worked perfectly. I came home in the early morning, showered, ate something quick, and slept while the rest of the building woke up around me. I thought I knew every sound this place could make. Last week, I found a note under my door. It was a small piece of paper, folded once. At first, I thought it was a bill or some notice from the landlord about the water being shut off again. I picked it up, opened it, and read the sentence written inside. You need to stop leaving the window open at night. I read it twice. The handwriting was neat and careful. Cursive, the kind of writing people do when they are not in a hurry. The letters had smooth loops and clean curves, like whoever wrote it had sat down and taken their time. The message made no sense. I do not leave my window open at night. I am careful about that. My apartment is on the ground floor, and the window faces the alley behind the building. That alley is narrow, dirty, and badly lit. People use it as a shortcut sometimes, and I have seen more than one stranger standing out there smoking or digging through the trash bins. Because of that, I always lock the window before I go to bed. I checked it that morning. Locked. I checked it again before I left for work that evening. Still locked. Then, I checked it one more time. Because, after finding the note, I could not remember if I had actually checked it or only thought about checking it. It was locked then, too. So I decided the note must have been meant for someone else. Maybe another ground floor apartment. Maybe someone upstairs had dropped it at the wrong door. It was strange, but not strange enough for me to lose sleep over. I threw it away. The next morning, there was another note under my door. Same paper, same fold, same neat handwriting. You need to stop leaving the window open at night. This time I did not throw it away right away. I stood in the entryway for a while, holding it between my fingers. The apartment was quiet, except for the faint sound of the old man's TV through the wall. I had just come home from work, and I was exhausted, but the tired feeling faded a little as I read the message again. I went straight to the window. Locked, I checked the front door. Locked, nothing looked disturbed. My shoes were where I had left them. The chair by the window was in its usual place. The sink still had the mug I had used before work. Nobody had been in my apartment. At least that was what I told myself. I asked my neighbor next door if he had seen anyone near my door. He answered wearing the same green bathrobe he always wore. In 3 years, I had never seen him in anything else. Not once. I did not even know if he owned normal clothes. He opened the door just wide enough to look out, his TV blaring behind him. I showed him the note. He squinted at it, then shook his head. "Wasn't me," he said. "Did you see anyone in the hall?" "Nope." Then he closed the door. I asked the couple upstairs later that day. They were already arguing when I knocked. When they opened the door, both of them looked annoyed, as if I had interrupted something important. I showed them the note and asked if either of them had written it or seen anyone around my door. They both said no. The woman barely looked at the paper. The man did not look at me at all. I am not even sure they know my name. The woman below me said she had not written anything either. She opened the door with one hand still resting on the frame, like she wanted to get back to the piano as quickly as possible. From inside her apartment, I could see the corner of it. Dark wood, lid open, sheet music piled on top. "I don't go out much," she said. I believed her. I heard that piano every day. The notes kept coming. Every morning there was another one under my door. Same paper, same fold, same handwriting, same message. "You need to stop leaving the window open at night." After the third note, I started locking my window twice. I would push it down, turn the lock, tug the frame, then unlock and lock it again, just to be sure. I put a chair in front of it before I went to sleep. I checked the latch. I checked the frame. I even went outside into the alley and stood there for 20 minutes, staring up at my own window from the other side. There was nothing strange about it. No scratches on the sill, no footprints in the dirt, no marks on the wall, no sign that anyone had climbed in. Still, the notes kept appearing. I started to get paranoid. At first, it was small. I would check the window before bed, then walk away, then come back and check again. Then I started checking the door, too. Then the closet. Then under the bed, even though I knew that was ridiculous. I stopped sleeping properly. I would lie in bed with the lights off and stare at the window. The chair would be in front of it. The lock would be turned. The curtains would hang still. Everything would look exactly as it should. But by morning, there would be another note. I started writing down the dates. I thought if I kept a record, it would help me feel sane. Day 1, Day 2, Day 3. By Day 4, I had filled an entire page because I kept writing the wrong date and starting over. I do not know why I kept messing it up. I knew what day it was. At least I thought I did. But my hand kept writing the wrong number, and every time I crossed it out. I felt more anxious. I took photos of the notes and showed them to the landlord. He looked at them on my phone and shrugged. "Probably kids messing around," he said. "How would kids get into the building every morning?" He sighed, like I was making his day harder by asking questions. "I don't know. People get in. Tenants buzz people in all the time. Don't worry about it." He said it with the tone people use when they do not want to think about something. The tone that makes it clear they have already decided your problem is not their problem. I worried about it anyway. Last night, I decided to stay awake. I came home from work and did not go to bed. I made coffee strong enough to taste burnt, turned off every light in the apartment, and sat in the living room facing the front door. The window was locked. The chair was in front of it. The note from the previous morning was on the coffee table beside me, still unfolded. I watched the bottom of the door. For hours, nothing happened. No footsteps in the hallway. No shadow under the door. No paper sliding through the gap. The old man's TV mumbled through the wall. The couple upstairs argued for a while, then went quiet. The woman below me played the same broken piece of music until sometime after 2. Then even that stopped. I stayed awake until about 4 in the morning. At least, I think I did. I remember looking at the door. I remember the coffee going cold. I remember my eyes burning. Then I woke up. I was still sitting in the chair. Gray morning light filled the room. There was a note on the floor. For a few seconds, I did not move. I only stared at it. It lay just inside the door, folded once, waiting for me. I picked it up. Same paper. Same handwriting. You need to stop leaving the window open at night. I walked to the window. The chair was still in front of it. The lock was still turned. But the window was open. Only a crack. Just enough. I stood there for a long time, staring at that thin, dark line between the window and the frame. I did not open it. I know I did not open it. I checked the lock again. It was still turned, still in the locked position. But somehow the window was not fully closed. That should not have been possible. I looked back at the note. Then I looked at the handwriting. I had been staring at those notes for days, but I had only been thinking about who could have written them. I had not really studied the letters. Not properly. This time, I looked closer. The neat cursive. The loops. The way the capital Y leaned slightly too far to the right. The small break in the word window where the pen lifted for half a second. The shape of the T in night. My stomach turned cold. The handwriting was mine. Every letter, every curve. I recognized it from notes I left for myself at work. Shopping lists. Reminders on sticky notes. Old birthday cards. It was my handwriting. I sat on the floor for maybe 20 minutes trying to remember writing them. Maybe longer. Time had become difficult to hold on to. I kept looking at the note, then at my hand, then back at the note. I do not remember writing any of them. I do not remember opening the window. I do not remember folding the paper or sliding it under my own door. But I must have. That is what scares me most. If it had been a neighbor, I could call the police. If it had been the landlord, I could move. If it had been some stranger in the alley, I could buy a better lock. But what do you do when the person leaving warnings is yourself, and you have no memory of it? I have been sitting here all morning. The window is closed now. Locked, the chair is back in front of it. I have checked it 3 times. Maybe 4. I lost count. I keep trying not to look at it, but my eyes always drift back. A few minutes ago, I found another note. It was not under the door this time. It was on my nightstand. I do not remember putting it there. I do not even remember going into the bedroom after I checked the window. I picked up the note, then put it down, then picked it up again because I became suddenly sure I had read it wrong. But I had not. It said, Stop fighting it. Just open the window. I do not think I am going to sleep tonight. I do not think I am ever going to sleep again. The piano below me has been quiet all morning. I did not notice at first. I think I had gotten so used to that broken song that I only understood something was wrong when it was gone. The silence from below feels heavier than the music ever did. A little while ago, I looked at my reflection in the window. It was smiling. I was not. Then it lifted its hand. Slowly, it raised one finger to the glass from the other side, and it began writing. I already knew what it was going to say. Story 2. He first called to me when I was 9 years old. It happened in June on one of those hot summer nights when the air feels heavy even after the sun goes down. Earlier that day, I had played in a baseball tournament. I was exhausted from running, swinging, shouting, and standing under the sun for hours, but I was also too excited to sleep. Our team had won, and that was all I could think about. Even after I got home, even after I showered, brushed my teeth, and climbed into bed, part of me was still on that field. I could still hear the crowd cheering. I could still feel my teammates throwing their arms around me after the final play. I could still see my parents smiling from the bleachers. After the game, we had gone for pizza, and I remembered sitting there with my uniform still dusty, feeling like the best player in the world, even though I probably wasn't. Those memories were fresh and bright in my mind. I remember lying in bed and smiling to myself, replaying everything again and again. But I could not fall asleep. I tossed and turned for what felt like hours. My room was dark, except for the faint blue light coming through the window. Outside, the summer night was alive with sound. Cicadas called from the trees, their distant humming rising and falling like a strange lullaby. Crickets chirped in the grass. Somewhere farther away, a dog barked once and then went quiet. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but every time I did, I saw the baseball field again. My heart would start racing, and I would feel the same excitement all over again. Finally, I sat up, annoyed with myself for still being awake. My bedroom window faced the woods behind our house. I looked out at the trees. When I was a kid, I always felt like the forest was creeping closer to our backyard every year. I knew that probably wasn't true, but it seemed that way. The trees stood dark and tall just beyond the grass, their branches reaching out like they were slowly planning to swallow the house. That night, the moon covered everything in a pale blue light. The leaves moved gently in the breeze, and the tree trunks looked almost silver. I sat there listening to the cicadas. Their clicks and chirps filled the air. The moon was full and bright enough that, in my 9-year-old mind, I wondered if the insects thought the sun had never really gone down. I turned and looked at the alarm clock on my nightstand. 11:05 p.m., way past my bedtime. My parents would have been angry if they knew I was still awake. Not furious, but disappointed in the way parents are when they think you are old enough to know better. I lowered myself back onto the pillow and pulled the blanket up, trying to force my body to settle down. The sounds outside had softened by then. The loud chorus of insects had faded, leaving only a few distant crickets calling from somewhere deep in the yard. The silence around those small sounds felt strange, not peaceful, more like the world was waiting. I squeezed my eyes shut. I told myself that if I pretended to be asleep long enough, maybe my brain would believe it and finally shut off. For a little while, the memories of the baseball game faded. The pizza, the cheering, the dirt under my shoes, all of it drifted away. Then the cicadas came back, all at once. Their screams rose from the forest like someone had turned up a hidden radio. The sound was sharp, loud, and impossible to ignore. It filled my ears so completely that I could not think about anything else. I lay there, staring into the dark, trying to decide whether they were actually louder or if they only seemed louder because I was paying attention. After a while, the noise faded again. Silence returned. I waited. About 3 minutes later, the cicadas started up again. This time, they were louder. There was no question about it. I was not imagining things. Their calls were stronger, closer, and more intense than before. I sat up slowly. The sound faded again, but my skin had started to prickle. Something about the pattern felt wrong. It wasn't like normal insect noise anymore. It felt organized, almost deliberate. When the sound rose for the third time, a strange realization came over me. I got out of bed and walked to the window. The floor was cool under my bare feet. I moved quietly because I did not want my parents to hear me. When I reached the window, I leaned forward and pressed my ear against the glass. I listened. The cicadas were not just louder. They were closer. Somehow, I could tell the source of the clicking and hissing had moved from deep in the forest to the edge of the trees, right where the backyard ended. That made no sense. Cicadas do not gather and move toward a house like that. Their sound does not shift like a crowd walking closer. But that was exactly what it felt like. Why were they coming closer? What was bringing them toward me? That was when I heard the voice. At first, I did not know what it was. With my ear pressed to the window, I could hear more than before. Every detail of the night seemed sharper. I could hear crickets hidden in the grass, katydids moving in the dark, and the cicadas clicking and humming in a steady rhythm. Their sound rose in waves. It would slowly build, growing louder and louder until it filled everything. Then it would fade, one insect at a time, until only the quiet remained. It reminded me of ocean waves rolling in and pulling back, except these waves were made of buzzing, clicking, and screaming. In the silence between those waves, I heard mumbling. A low voice, a man's voice. I did not believe it at first. It was buried under the insects, hidden inside their rhythm. It sounded like hearing a conversation through a wall, too muffled to understand, but too clear to ignore. The voice was deep and heavy, vibrating through the night. I could not make out the words. I pulled back slightly, my heart beating harder. Was someone outside? Was a man standing in the woods? I stared into the trees, but all I saw was moonlight and shadow. The voice came again during the next quiet moment. This time I was sure. I could not understand what he was saying, but I could feel something in the way he spoke. There was warmth in it, passion, care. It sounded gentle in a way that made me want to listen longer, even though every part of me knew I should wake my parents. I stayed at the window. The more I listened, the more I heard. The words did not become clear exactly, but I started to notice their shape, the rise and fall of the voice, the pauses, the emotion behind each sound. It was like the man was speaking directly to me, even though he was too far away to hear. Or maybe he was not far away at all. I wondered if I was dreaming. It did not feel like a dream. My room was too real. The cold glass against my ear was real. The carpet under my feet was real. The blue moonlight on the wall was real, but the voice felt both real and impossible at the same time. Then I noticed something that made my stomach twist. I was not hearing the voice with my ears. I stepped back from the window. The cicadas outside were still calling, but the voice remained inside my head for a few seconds after I moved away. It faded slowly into a low hum, then blended back into the night. The silence after it felt worse than the voice itself. I waited in the middle of the room, breathing fast. Then I went back to the window. I pressed my ear against the glass again. The cicadas began to rise. As their sound grew louder, the voice returned, hiding inside it like something wrapped in wings. Even though the insects were at the edge of the forest, and the voice seemed impossible to place, I could feel the meaning behind every word, not the meaning in language. Something deeper. Something that moved under the words and reached straight into my mind. It felt like the words were swirling inside my head. They pooled together, turning into shapes I could almost see. It reminded me of closing your eyes and staring hard at the strange floating colors behind your eyelids. Those soft shapes that drift and twist in the darkness. Only now, the shapes were made from sound. Strange colors flickered in my vision. Lines curled and folded into each other. I saw patterns I did not understand. I wanted to pull away. I could not. The insects grew louder. At first, the sound rose slowly. Then, it kept rising. The wave was supposed to fall again, but it did not. It grew and grew until it felt like the whole forest had opened its mouth and started screaming. The sound rolled over the edge of the trees and crashed into the house. I stumbled back from the window. The noise was deafening. It was not only outside anymore, it was above me, inside the walls, under the floor, and inside my skull. The cicadas screamed from every direction. The crickets and katydids joined them, thousands and thousands of tiny voices building into one endless ringing cry. The man's voice grew louder with them. I fell to the floor. Tears filled my eyes. I covered my ears with both hands, but it did nothing. The sound did not need my ears anymore. It was inside me. It filled my head until I could not tell where my thoughts ended, and the noise began. The voice spoke faster now. The colors came back. So many colors. They flooded my eyes even though they were open. Shapes spun and crashed into each other. Blue, red, yellow, white, black. They twisted with the sound, folding in on themselves like they were alive. I curled into a ball on the floor, crying, shaking, and trying to scream, but my voice disappeared under the insects. The cicadas reached a peak. The sound became so loud that I thought my head would split open. Then everything stopped. All at once. The room fell silent. The only thing left was the ringing in my ears. I lay on the floor, frozen, my hands still pressed against the sides of my head. My chest hurt from breathing too fast. My face was wet with tears. Then, in the silence, I heard him clearly for the first time. Not outside. Not through the window. Inside my mind. It was the voice of an old man. Deep, rough, and raspy. The warmth was gone now. There was no kindness in it. No comfort. It was cold, stern, and commanding. It spoke only 4 words. Come to me, child. It did not sound like a request. It sounded like a father's demand. That was when I screamed. I screamed and screamed until my parents came running. Story 3. Hi, My name is Jim. That is not my real name for obvious reasons, but it is close enough for this story. I am 17 years old, and I live in New Delhi, India. I am a normal teenager in most ways. I go to school, waste too much time on my phone, worry about entrance exams, and pretend I understand physics better than I really do. To be honest, I am terrible at physics. In my last test, I scored 200 out of 400, and most of those marks were because of chemistry, which is the one subject I am actually good at. That Sunday was supposed to be just another boring extra class for engineering entrance preparation. If you have ever been part of that world, you know how exhausting it can be. Classes on weekends, tests every few days. Teachers who talk like your whole future depends on one formula, and parents who think extra coaching is the answer to every problem. Our physics class ran from 3:30 in the afternoon to 9:00 at night, which is already too long for a subject that feels like punishment. My friends Henry and John were with me. Those are fake names, too. Henry is the careful one, the kind of guy who thinks before doing anything. John is the opposite. He laughs first and regrets later. I was somewhere in the middle, though that day I acted more like John than I should have. Before I explain what happened, I should describe the coaching building. It was huge, and it always felt strange after evening. The second floor was for students from 9th and 10th grade. The third floor was for biology students preparing for medical entrance exams. The fourth floor, where we studied, was for mathematics and engineering students. The ground floor and first floor were different. They did not feel like part of a busy coaching center. They felt like a dead mall. There were shuttered shops, closed offices, small spa rooms with frosted glass, and empty corridors that smelled of dust and old cleaning chemicals. By 6 p.m., we were completely tired. The teacher was going through some topic about current electricity, and I was staring at the board like the numbers might arrange themselves into something I understood. Henry looked half asleep. John kept checking the time. The classroom was full, but everyone had that drained look students get after hours of trying to force their brains to work. That was when John whispered, "Let's leave for a while." At first, I thought he was joking. Then he said we could sneak out for 2 hours, watch a movie on our phone somewhere quiet, and come back before class ended to collect our bags. It was stupid. It was also exactly the kind of stupid idea that sounds great when you are 17 and exhausted. The evening security guard was sitting near the main area, completely focused on his phone. He did not even look up when people walked past. Sneaking out was easier than it should have been. We slipped out of the classroom, took the fire exit stairs, and started heading down. On the first floor, Henry got nervous. "Guys, we should go back," he whispered. John rolled his eyes. "You get scared too easily." I should have listened to Henry. I know that now. He had a good sense for when something was wrong, but at the time, I did not want to seem scared, and I did not want to go back to physics class. "We're just exploring," I told him. "Nothing will happen." We had heard there was a parking lot under the building. None of us had ever seen it. The idea of a hidden basement under that strange, empty first floor was enough to make us curious, so we kept going. The first basement was massive. Our footsteps echoed as we stepped out of the stairwell. The ceiling was low in some places, with pipes running across it. A few cars were parked here and there, but most of the space was empty. It had that unfinished, forgotten feeling, like a place people built but stopped caring about. The air smelled cold and dusty. The lights worked, but not well. Some flickered. Some were dead. The corners stayed dark no matter how much light there was. It felt like one of those backrooms videos online where the place looks normal but somehow wrong. For a few minutes, we tried to act like it was fun. John joked about filming a horror short. I told him to shut up because his voice sounded too loud down there. Henry stayed close to us and kept looking over his shoulder. We all felt it. That feeling of being watched. Not just nervousness, not just imagination. It was heavy, like someone was standing somewhere in the dark, waiting for us to notice them. We looked for cameras because that made more sense. Maybe someone was watching through CCTV. We found one camera in a corner, but it was covered in dust and looked dead. The wire above it was loose. It did not comfort me. We sat near a pillar and tried watching a movie on one of our phones. That had been the whole plan. Sneak out, relax, waste time, go back before anyone noticed. But I could not focus. Every few seconds, I looked around. The basement was too quiet. Even though it was June and New Delhi was burning hot outside, the air down there was freezing. Not normal underground cool. It felt like a December night, the kind of cold that gets into your fingers and makes you keep rubbing your hands together. After a while, we started exploring. That was when John found the ramp. It sloped down at the far end of the basement and led to another level below. It had been blocked off with flimsy barricades and faded signs that said, "Do not enter." The signs should have been enough. The cold should have been enough. Henry saying, "No, absolutely not," should have been enough. But we were idiots. John pushed one barricade aside. I helped him move the second one. Henry did not help, but he followed us because he did not want to stay behind alone. That was the biggest mistake of our lives. The second basement was darker and much colder. The moment we stepped onto that level, the air changed. It felt stale, like it had not moved in years. A few tube lights buzzed overhead, blinking weakly. Most of the space was in shadow. There were vans parked along one side, all covered in dust. Some had flat tires. Some looked like they had not been touched in months. "Okay," Henry whispered. "We saw it. Now let's go." John ignored him and walked toward one of the vans. I followed because I did not want him wandering alone. I wiped dust off one of the side windows with my sleeve and looked inside. My stomach turned. There were used condoms scattered across the seats. Blood was splattered over the white upholstery. A dark handprint was smeared against the inside of the window. The blood did not look fresh from that day, but it also did not look old enough to be forgotten. Maybe a few months, maybe less. I do not know. I only know it looked real. I stepped back. John stopped smiling. Henry's voice shook. "We need to leave now." We should have listened. Instead, we moved to another van. I do not know why. Maybe our brains could not accept what we had seen, so we needed to confirm it. Maybe we were too shocked to make a smart decision. The second van was worse. There was more blood. A whiskey bottle lay on the floor, the kind you see in duty-free shops at airports. The tires were flat, and not in a normal way. They looked like someone had done it on purpose. The keys were still in the ignition. That detail scared me more than it should have. People do not leave keys in a vehicle unless they leave in a hurry. The smell inside that van was awful. Old alcohol, dust, something sour underneath. Something that made me want to breathe through my mouth and run at the same time. Then our lights caught the floor farther ahead. There was a massive blood stain spread across the concrete. None of us spoke for a few seconds. At the far corner of the basement, We saw a BMW SUV under a black cover. It was parked badly, crooked across the space, like someone had driven it in during a panic and stopped wherever they could. The number plate had been scratched so badly we could not read it. John pulled the cover back. The SUV was wrecked. The headlights were broken. The windows were shattered. The roof was dented inward. Inside, we saw knives with dried blood on them. There were dark stains on the seats, tissues covered in a deep red color, and a passport lying on one of the seats. We did not touch it. Broken glass covered the floor and the seat edges, and none of us wanted to cut ourselves. The smell of whiskey was strong enough to make my head feel light. I remember thinking that the whole thing looked like evidence someone had tried to hide. Not clean up. Hide. The car was half covered. The keys were still there. The passport had been left behind. Everything looked unfinished, like someone had planned a return but never did. Then we heard footsteps on the ramp. All three of us froze. The sound came from above, slow and clear, echoing down into the second basement. Step, step, step. We panicked and hid behind the BMW. John switched off his torch first. I did the same. Henry's hands were shaking so badly that I had to grab his wrist and push his phone down before the light gave us away. The footsteps kept coming, but no one appeared. That was the worst part. The sound moved down the ramp, closer and closer, but there was no body, no shadow, no security guard, nothing we could see. The temperature dropped even more. It became so cold we could see our breath in front of our faces, like winter vapor. My teeth wanted to chatter, but I forced my jaw shut. Henry was trembling beside me. John had one hand over his own mouth. Then the footsteps stopped. Silence took over. We stayed behind the BMW for what felt like forever. Later, John said it was around 20 minutes. I believe him. It felt longer. Finally, Henry turned his torch back on. The beam landed on the floor a few feet away from us. There was a human hand lying on the concrete, a severed hand. The skin was grayish. Dried blood trailed behind it in a dark line. Ants crawled over the fingers and around the wrist. For a second, none of us moved. My brain understood what I was seeing, but my body refused to react. Then Henry made a small sound. Not a scream, more like the air leaving him. He froze in place, completely froze. I told you he was sensitive and easily scared, but this was different. He looked like his mind had shut down. John grabbed his arm. "Move," he whispered. Henry did not move. I heard the footsteps again. This time, they were not slow. They were running. The sound came from the darkness beyond the vans, not from the ramp. Fast footsteps. Heavy, getting closer. John shouted something, and that broke Henry out of his freeze. We turned and ran. I looked back once. I wish I had not. Something was coming toward us from the dark. It was shaped like a person, but not exactly. It looked like a shadow pulled into the shape of a body, moving too fast and too smoothly. Its face was blurred, like someone had rubbed it out. I could not see eyes, mouth, or nose. Just a dark, shifting head turned toward us. It did not yell. It did not say, "Stop," like a guard would. It just chased us silently. That silence terrified me more than any scream could have. We ran up the ramp, knocking into the barricades we had moved earlier. One of them scraped across the floor behind us with a horrible metal sound. We did not stop to put anything back. We ran through the first basement, up the fire exit stairs, and out of the building into the street. The outside noise hit us like a blessing. Traffic, horns, people talking. Motorbikes, the regular chaos of Delhi evening. It was 7:30 p.m. I had never been so relieved to hear traffic in my life. We did not go home right away because our bags were still in class. We stood outside for a long time, trying to look normal. None of us spoke much. Henry looked like he might cry. John kept rubbing his hands over his face. I felt cold even though the evening air was hot. At 9 p.m., when class ended, we went back upstairs to collect our bags. We tried to walk normally, but we were sweating badly, and not just from heat. Other students kept their distance from us. Maybe we smelled like fear. Maybe we looked like we had seen something we should not have seen. We picked up our bags and left without explaining anything to anyone. By silent agreement, we decided not to tell anyone. But I have not been able to stop thinking about it. The vans, the blood, the handprints, the used condoms, the passport, the whiskey bottles, the broken BMW, the keys still in the ignition, the car parked badly and only half covered. It all felt like some violent crime had happened there, and someone had tried to hide the evidence in a place nobody was supposed to enter. The severed hand looked small. I cannot be sure, but the shape made us think it might have belonged to a woman. That thought has not left me. I keep imagining someone trapped down there, hurt and terrified, while the rest of the building carried on above them. Students studying, teachers shouting formulas, the security guard watching videos on his phone, everyone living normally over a basement full of blood. But even that is not what scares me most. What scares me most is the thing that chased us. If it had been a guard, he would have shouted. If it had been a criminal hiding there, he would have cursed at us or tried to grab us. If it had been some homeless person, we would have seen a real face, real clothes, something human. But that thing had no clear face. It was a shadow with a blurred head, running at us without making a sound except for its footsteps. I do not know if it was protecting the evidence, guarding the place, or still looking for whoever left that hand behind. I only know this. I could not sleep last night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the second basement again. I saw the BMW under the black cover. I saw the blood on the white seats. I saw Henry frozen in the torchlight. I saw the ants crawling over that hand. And behind all of it, I saw the dark shape running toward us, silent and faceless, like it had been waiting under that building for someone stupid enough to move the barricades. Story 4. I don't even know how to start this, because every time I try to put it into words, it sounds impossible. I guess it started with Claire. More specifically, it started with Claire and the elevator. One Tuesday evening, she stepped into it after we had an argument, and she never came back. That is the simple version. That is the version the police wrote down, even if they did not believe most of it. Their official report called it a missing person case. They said she probably left on her own. They said couples fight all the time, and maybe she had decided to disappear for a while. They said I was emotional and looking for something to blame, but I know what I saw. Or maybe I should say, I know what I did not see. Claire got into the elevator. The doors closed. 10 seconds later, they opened again. And she was gone. Our building is old, one of those tired apartment blocks that should have been torn down years ago, but somehow keeps standing because rent is cheap and nobody in charge wants to spend money fixing anything. The carpets in the hallways are stained. The lights buzz. The pipes knock in the walls at night. Half the windows never close properly, and the lobby smells like wet concrete no matter how often someone mops it. The elevator has always been the worst part. Everyone hated it. It was old, slow, and loud. It smelled like mildew, old metal, and burnt dust. Every time it moved, it groaned like it was being forced awake from a deep sleep. Sometimes it stopped an inch too low or too high, and you had to step carefully so you didn't trip. Sometimes the doors opened halfway, shook, then closed again before opening fully. We complained about it for years. Nothing ever got fixed. For a long time, I thought it was just a bad elevator in a bad building. Annoying, sure, maybe unsafe, but normal. Then it started doing things that were not normal. At first, it was small. The lights inside would flicker, not white like usual, but a sick yellow color that made everyone's skin look dead. The buttons would light up on their own, sometimes in the wrong order. The fifth floor button would glow, then the second, then the basement. Then, buttons that did not even exist would seem to flash behind the plastic panel. Once, I pressed the lobby button and the elevator went up instead of down. Another time, I stepped inside from the sixth floor, and when the doors opened, I was still on the sixth floor. Same hallway, same carpet, same broken light near the stairwell. But something felt wrong. I could not explain it then. It looked like our floor, but it felt like a copy of our floor made by someone who had only seen it in a photograph. Everything was too still. The air smelled like ozone and old paper, like a printer left running in a closed room for years. The walls looked too bright, even though the lights were dim. The silence felt heavy, like the whole hallway was holding its breath. I stepped back into the elevator before the doors could close, and when they opened again, I was in the real lobby. Or at least, I think it was real. After that, I started taking the stairs more often. Then, people started disappearing. The first was Mr. Hendricks from 4B. He was an older man, retired, quiet, and strange in that harmless way some lonely people become strange. He never talked to anyone, unless he had to. He collected newspapers from the lobby every morning and always wore the same brown jacket, even in warm weather. One morning, he got into the elevator on the fourth floor. A woman from 4C saw him do it. She said he was holding a grocery list and humming under his breath. He pressed the lobby button. The doors closed. When they opened on the ground floor, he was gone. The elevator was empty. No sound, no struggle, no blood, no dropped groceries. Nothing. The police came, asked a few questions, and acted like everyone was wasting their time. They said maybe Mr. Hendricks had taken the stairs. They said maybe the witness was confused. They said maybe he had gone out another way. But I knew that did not make sense. There was only one elevator. The stairs were at the opposite end of the hall. The woman from 4C had watched him step inside. The lobby camera showed the elevator doors opening, empty, less than a minute later. Still, no one wanted to say the obvious thing. He had gone in, he had not come out. The next was Linda from 3A. Linda was different from Mr. Hendricks. She was social, loud, always in a hurry. She talked on the phone in the hallway and watered the dying plants near the window, even though they did not belong to her. She was the kind of person everyone knew, even people who did not like her. She disappeared on a Saturday morning. She was going to meet her sister for lunch. Her sister called later, upset, saying Linda never showed up. When the police searched the building, they found Linda's phone on the elevator floor. The screen was cracked. The last open app was her sister's contact page. The timestamp on the last attempted call was 11:47 a.m. Her sister confirmed she had never arrived at the restaurant. That was when I started paying closer attention. I should have said something then, but what could I say? That the elevator was wrong? That sometimes when the doors opened, the building on the other side did not feel like our building? That sometimes I could hear breathing behind the elevator walls when the doors were closed? Who would believe that? Even I did not want to believe it. But once I started noticing, I could not stop. The elevator had patterns. Not normal patterns, but strange ones. It acted up more at certain times, usually late at night or just before sunset, when the building was quiet and the hallway lights were starting to feel too dim. The yellow flicker came before the wrong doors opened. The buttons glowed in impossible sequences. Sometimes the panel showed numbers we did not have floors for. Once I saw the button for floor 0 light up. We do not have a floor 0. Another time, there was a symbol where the basement button should have been. It looked like a circle with a line through it. But when I stared too long, it seemed to bend into something else. Something like an eye or a mouth. And then there was the breathing. It only happened when the elevator doors were closed. If you stood close enough, with your ear near the metal, you could hear it. Slow, wet, deep, not from inside the elevator, but from behind the walls around it. Like something huge was trapped inside the building. Like the elevator was not a machine at all, but part of a body. Then Claire disappeared. We had been fighting that night. I hate that this is the last real memory I have of her. Not laughing, not sleeping beside me, not drinking coffee in one of my old shirts. Fighting, I do not even remember what started it anymore. Something small. Something stupid. Bills, maybe, or me working late, or her saying I never listened. It feels so pointless now. We were both tired. We were both angry. The argument grew until it was bigger than whatever had caused it. She grabbed her bag and said she was going to stay with a friend. I told her to go. I wish I could pull those words out of the air and bury them somewhere they could never be heard. She walked into the hallway. I followed her because some part of me wanted to apologize, even though I was too proud to do it. The elevator doors opened with that familiar metal groan. The inside light flickered yellow. I should have stopped her. I saw the light. I knew what it meant. But I was angry, and she was angry, and I let her step inside. "Claire," I said. She turned to look at me. For 1 second, I thought she might come back. Her face softened. Her hand tightened around the strap of her bag. Then the doors closed between us. 10 seconds passed, maybe less. Then the elevator doors opened again. But it was not our floor. It was her office. At least, it looked like her office. I had visited Claire at work many times. I knew the layout. The reception desk, the row of glass-walled rooms, the little break area near the back. When the elevator doors opened, all of it was there. Same furniture, same carpet, same bright office lights. But it was wrong. The photos on her desk were different. In one frame, she was standing beside people I had never seen before. In another, there was a picture of us, but we looked older, much older. There were children with us, children we never had. The whiteboard near the conference room had a client list written on it, but none of the names were familiar. Some of them were not names at all. They were marks, scratches, symbols that hurt to look at. People sat at the desks, but no one moved, no one typed, no one breathed. They all faced their computers, frozen in place, as if someone had paused the world. "Claire?" I called. My voice did not echo. It just died in the air. Then I noticed the mirror. There was a tall mirror mounted near the office entrance. In its reflection, I could see both doors. The elevator doors behind me in the hallway, and the office doors in front of me. And in the gap between them, something moved. It was not a person. It was not exactly a shadow either. It was thin and tall and folded in ways that made no sense. It seemed to be standing between the two places, in the small, impossible space where the elevator should have been. I could not see a face, but I knew it was watching me. For 1 second, it leaned closer. Then the doors slammed shut. The elevator was gone. Our hallway was normal again. Claire never came back. I told the police everything I could except the parts that would have made them stop listening. I told them about the fight. I told them she stepped into the elevator. I told them the doors opened and she was gone. They asked if she had been unhappy. They asked if she had friends in another city. They asked if she had money saved. They asked if I had hurt her. After that, everyone looked at me differently. The building manager said the elevator logs showed nothing strange. The police said cameras in the lobby were unhelpful that night because of a temporary recording issue. They said Claire might have walked out through the back exit. They said adults can leave if they want to. But I know she did not leave. She was taken. By the elevator. Or by whatever lives behind it. I do not sleep anymore. When I close my eyes, I hear the doors opening. I hear the soft buzz of the yellow light. I hear Claire's voice from somewhere far away, calling my name through metal. Sometimes I stand in the hallway at night and listen to the elevator breathe. The worst part is that I think it knows I am listening. A few nights ago, I was stupid enough to get inside. I had been awake for almost 3 days. I kept hearing sounds from the elevator shaft, like whispers climbing through the walls. At first, I thought they were random, but then I started hearing words. My name, Claire's name, other names too. Hendrix, Linda, names spoken slowly, like someone reading a list. I told myself I only wanted to look. Just step inside, check the buttons, prove there was something wrong with it. I thought maybe if I recorded it on my phone, someone would finally believe me. The elevator doors opened before I pressed the call button. The inside smelled like burnt dust and rain on hot wires. The lights were dim. The mirror on the back wall looked darker than usual. I stepped inside. The doors closed. Then the buttons lit up. Not the normal buttons. The numbers disappeared one by one, replaced by symbols I had never seen before. A crooked line. A black square. A shape like a hand with too many fingers. A circle that seemed to pulse. A mark that looked like a door. I should have pressed nothing. I should have screamed. Instead, I pressed the symbol that looked like a door. The elevator lurched. Not up, not down. Sideways, maybe. My stomach twisted. The walls groaned. The light flickered so fast that the inside of the elevator looked like a series of broken pictures. For 1 second, I saw Claire standing at the edge of the hallway through the crack between the doors. She was smiling. Then, her smile stretched too wide. Then, she was gone. The doors opened. I stepped out because I was too terrified to stay inside. Now I am somewhere I do not recognize. The hallway looks almost like ours, but not quite. The walls are the same shape. The carpet is the same color. The light fixtures are in the same places. But the wallpaper is peeling in patterns that make my eyes ache if I stare too long. The air smells like burnt sugar and metal. Everything is too quiet. There is no elevator behind me anymore. No doors, no buttons, just a flat wall where the elevator should be. At the end of the hallway, there is a door. It is slightly open. Behind it, I can hear music. Not from a radio. Not from a phone. It is coming from inside the walls. I should turn back. I should call for help. But there is nowhere to go back to. There is only the hallway. There is only the door. And from behind it, I can hear Claire whispering my name. Story 5. I am sure you have had moments like this yourself. Small moments, ordinary moments, the kind of actions you do without thinking because your body already knows how to do them. Taking off your shirt, looking into a mirror for half a second, turning off the basement light and rushing upstairs, standing alone in a supermarket aisle and suddenly realizing nobody else is near you. Little gaps in life, empty seconds, moments you forget almost as soon as they happen. But what if those little moments are not empty? What if one of them is important? What if, during one of those simple actions, you could slip somewhere else for a second? What if you could cross into a place you were never meant to see? What if you could meet someone there, or something? Recently, I have been reading a lot. I do not mean a few books before bed. I mean every waking hour. Knowledge has become the only thing that matters to me. I did not have enough time to study while working, so I quit my job. I have been living in a hotel room for 2 weeks now. I eat cheap ramen, drink water, and stay away from alcohol because I need my mind clear. Judge me if you want. I do not care anymore. All I care about is information. What I study is probability. Probability of what, you might ask? Honestly, I am still not completely sure. What I do know is this. There is something hostile out there. Something with a chance of appearing so low that most people could live 1,000 lives and never sense it. Something almost impossible for human eyes to catch. Almost impossible, but not completely. And I need to reach it. You might wonder how a normal person becomes interested in something this strange. The truth is, my path here was long, boring, and full of frustration. I have been frustrated with life for as long as I can remember. I was always well behaved. I finished school with decent grades because that was what I was told to do. I looked for jobs, smiled at bosses I hated, and did everything people said would make me stable. I got married. I got divorced. I went bankrupt. Someone stole the tires off my car. Life kept throwing the usual boring punishments at me, and I kept taking them. Then I remarried. My second wife was 10 years younger than me. We had 2 beautiful children. One became a ballet dancer. The other loved drifting too much, crashed, and broke his spine. Now he uses a wheelchair. I have loved people. I have hated people. I have felt excited, proud, ashamed, lonely, and disappointed. I have been through most of the normal emotional range a person can suffer through. And through all of it, I was unhappy. Not sad in a dramatic way, not the kind of unhappy people write songs about. Just gray, flat, tired, like life was a room with no windows and everyone kept telling me to decorate it. Then, one day, I went to a public college lecture. It was the fourth lecture I had attended since getting my diplomas. I did not go because I cared about the subjects. I went because I liked being around intelligent people. For an hour or two, I could sit in a room and listen to someone talk about something bigger than my own miserable little life. The professor was thin, short, and sweating badly in the summer heat. He looked like a man who might faint before finishing his notes. He did not look like someone who would change the direction of my life. The lecture was called The Theory of Common Entries. I had never heard of it before. Most people have not. The basic idea was that the afterlife is real, not necessarily heaven or hell in the way religion describes them, but some kind of existence beyond the normal functions of the body. Death, according to the theory, is the strongest and most certain way into that state. But death is also impossible to study properly. We do not have the tools to reach whatever part of reality the dead move into. We cannot follow them and come back with notes. But the theory suggested there was another way to touch a small part of that world. Small acts. Tiny, almost meaningless actions. The professor claimed that certain ordinary actions could become entries. Not full doors exactly, more like cracks. For a moment, while doing something so simple that your brain barely records it, you might brush against another layer of existence. There were conditions. First, the act had to be small. It had to feel unimportant. Something you would forget in 10 seconds. Taking off a shirt. Turning your head. Looking away from a mirror and back again. Blinking in a dark room. Second, the act had to carry a small amount of anxiety. Not real terror. Not the kind of fear you feel when someone jumps out at you. Just a tiny, strange feeling. A bit of suspense. A soft wrongness that makes your skin tighten. The kind of feeling you get when you turn off the basement light and hurry upstairs because, for no good reason, you do not want to be in the dark behind you. The examples are endless. You turn off your Bluetooth earphones and wonder, for half a second, if another sound will keep playing after they disconnect. You pull a shirt over your head, and while your face is covered by the fabric, you have the childish thought that maybe the room will be different when your eyes are uncovered again. You glance at a dark window across the street and think you saw a figure standing there. You blink in front of a mirror and feel, for one tiny moment, that your reflection did not blink at the same time. Most people have experienced things like this. Most people ignore them. That is why the theory caught me. It was not about haunted houses or cursed dolls or dead relatives whispering in attics. It was about the spaces inside normal life, the places where attention slips. But there is a catch. Several catches, really. You have probably done these actions thousands of times and experienced nothing strange. That is where probability comes in. The chance of an entry happening is almost impossibly low. I cannot give an exact number, but based on the cases I have studied, I believe it is far lower than 1 in a trillion, maybe much lower. And even if an entry happens, you may not see the full thing. Some people only experience something small. A sound, a shape, a face in the wrong place, a feeling of presence so strong it breaks them. Others may see more. I do not like thinking about what the more might be. You might ask why I would want to reach something like that if it is so dangerous. I do not have a rational answer. I have struggled with that for months. I know it does not make sense. I know a sane person would be thankful for never seeing such a thing. But I am tired of ordinary life. I am tired of the same gray days, the same failures, the same boring suffering, the same need for something to happen, anything that proves there is more than this. I needed a guide out of my dull existence, and this theory was the first thing I found that felt like a real door. If I can touch something feared by billions and document it properly, maybe I will finally feel alive. I began studying cases that seemed connected to the theory of common entries. One case involved a woman in Germany. It was not a famous case, just a missing person report that later became stranger after she was found and placed in a mental health facility. I found recorded interviews with her. Most people would hear them and call them nonsense, but if you listen closely, her words suggest an entry. She had been washing the window in her house. Each time she moved the rag across the glass, it blocked part of her view. A normal action. Small, repeated, slightly unsettling, because the room behind the glass was dark. For most of the wiping motions, she only saw the bedroom she shared with her husband. Then something changed. In the interview, between screaming and crying, she said her hand felt something soft. Not glass. Skin. She said the window had turned into skin under the rag. Before she began screaming too hard to understand, she said a few words clearly. Eye, tooth, blood. She has been in the facility for years. Doctors say childhood trauma and alcoholism caused her breakdown. That is their explanation. I have mine. Another case happened in Australia. This one had more witnesses, so of course people online added fake details to make it more dramatic. Still, some facts stayed consistent. A group of teenagers had a campfire party in a secluded area. They were drinking. One of the boys suggested wrestling with their shirts off, probably to show off. A few of the boys agreed, laughing and insulting each other while they pulled off their shirts. Then, one of them started screaming. Witnesses said it was not a normal scream. One person described it as animal, like a rabbit being torn apart. The boy, only 14, pointed toward the trees beyond the campfire light. Nobody else saw anything there. Not one witness reported seeing a person or animal in the direction he pointed. But panic spread anyway. Some tried to calm him. Some ran. Then the boy started smashing his own head against stones on the ground. The others tried to stop him, but by then he had hurt himself too badly. He died later at the hospital. Some stories claim nurses heard him whisper leave and begging before he became silent. Maybe that part is false. Maybe not. I believe that was an entry. There are other cases, too. A Japanese man who claimed he saw his dead grandmother in a cellar window. A girl in California who said she heard her mother burning in hell the moment she unplugged her headphones from her laptop. Even an explorer from the 17th century who wrote about seeing an infant, still attached to an umbilical cord, swimming through the Pacific Ocean. Most people would call these stories madness, grief, lies, or folklore. I call them patterns. The next thing I learned was that the probability of an entry might be increased. It sounds stupid at first, but stay with me. The method is repetition. You repeat a small, unsettling action again and again, hundreds of times, thousands if needed. Look at a basement corridor. Turn your head to the wall. Look back at the corridor. Repeat, put a shirt over your head. Pull it off. Put it on again. Repeat, glance at a dark window. Look away. Look back. Repeat, madness, right? Maybe, but I have been doing it. I have taken off my t-shirt and put it back on thousands of times. I have glanced into windows until my eyes hurt. I have trained myself to keep my eyes closed longer than normal when blinking. I have stood in bathrooms, basements, hotel rooms, and parking garages, trying to turn small acts into doorways. And finally, I think, I caught a glimpse. It happened in the bathroom of my hotel room. I had locked the door and pulled the curtains closed. The room was not completely dark, but it was dim enough to make the corners feel deep. I could not hear the neighbors. I could not hear the hallway. I felt deeply alone, not lonely. Alone, forgotten, cut off from the world. I had even watched creepy videos online beforehand to raise my anxiety a little. Not enough to panic, just enough to sharpen the air. The action was simple. Stare into the bathroom mirror. Watch for changes. Look down at the sink. Lift my head and look back into the mirror. Repeat. I had already lost count by the time anything happened. More than 300 times, I think. Less than 500. My neck hurt. My eyes felt dry. The muscles in my face had gone tight from staring at my own reflection. Each time I looked into the mirror, I imagined something appearing behind me. Sometimes I imagined a demon with burning claws. Sometimes I imagined my own face twisting into a huge smile I could not control. Sometimes I imagined my fingers tearing into my skin while I watched helplessly. Horrible things. Stupid things. Things my mind invented because it was bored and afraid. But nothing happened. Again and again, nothing happened. Then I saw a change. Or I think I did. It was like a shadow ran out of my vision just as my face lifted toward the mirror. A thin, dark line moved along the bathroom floor and escaped into the part of the room the mirror did not show. It was quick. Too quick. But I saw it. I froze. A disgusting excitement moved through me. Not joy, not relief. Something deeper and uglier. I had seen many false shapes already. I had learned how my brain made shadows into signs when I wanted too badly to see something. But this felt different. It was either a very strong illusion or the first hint of something real. Then, fear hit me. I did not hear a sound. Nothing touched me. But suddenly I felt that something might be standing in the corner behind me, wearing the most terrible expression a mind could understand. I was not even afraid of physical pain. Pain seemed small compared to the idea of seeing whatever waited there. I imagined it getting inside my thoughts, feeding on them, pulling them apart until I could not remain myself anymore. I imagined suffering so strange and complete that death would look like mercy. But I could not stop. Everything I had done had brought me to that moment. I had run from my boring life. I had quit my job. I had locked myself in this hotel room. I had chased this impossible theory until I became a joke even to myself. If there was something behind me, if the entry was opening, then I had to see it. Turn your head, I told myself. Do it. Find your meaning. I turned my head to the right. There was nothing there. No figure, no shape, no shadow. Only the bathroom wall, the towel rack, and the corner of the shower. A wave of shame went through me. Then anger. I felt stupid, disgusted with myself. I had been so close, or I had tricked myself into thinking I was close. Maybe there was no entry. Maybe the professor was insane. Maybe the stories were just stories. Maybe I had made my pathetic life even worse by chasing a theory that belonged in a lunatic's notebook. I became so angry that I wanted to punch the mirror, break the glass, destroy the room, destroy myself after. I pulled my hand back to strike. Then I turned my face toward the mirror again. and I saw the doorbell rang. The sound cut through the hotel room so sharply that I froze. Nobody had bothered me for 2 weeks. The hotel staff left me alone. I had paid in advance. I had no visitors. Nobody knew enough to come to my room. Yet someone was outside my door. The doorbell rang a second time. I realized I was standing in the bathroom doing nothing while someone waited. I ran out into the main room. Everything looked normal. The bed was unmade. Books and printed pages were spread across the table. Empty ramen cups sat near the trash. My laptop glowed faintly. Then I realized I was shirtless. My t-shirt was draped over the back of a chair. I grabbed it and started putting it on as I walked toward the door. Halfway through, with the fabric over my head and my arms lifted, a thought hit me. What if the thing ringing the doorbell was the anomaly? What if this was the entry? The professor said it could happen during a small act, a thoughtless act, something like taking off a shirt or putting one on, a moment where your eyes were covered and your mind carried just enough fear. I was putting on a shirt during an entry. I stopped moving at once. I squeezed my eyes shut under the fabric and held my breath. My heart was beating so fast I thought it might stop working. I pulled my arms back, and the shirt slipped away from me and fell somewhere on the floor. I did not know where. I did not care. I had not finished the action. That mattered. I do not know how I knew it mattered, but I did. I stood there in the room, blind by choice, frozen in place, waiting. The door handle moved. Then the footsteps began. At first, they were loud, then very loud. I stood like a statue, eyes shut, not breathing, every muscle locked. The footsteps moved closer, across the room. Slow, heavy, clear, then they sounded like they were right in front of my face, inches away. I almost opened my eyes. I cannot explain the effort it took not to. Every part of my body wanted to look. Every nerve screamed that I needed to know what was standing there. But some deeper part of me knew looking would complete the entry. It would make the thing real in a way I could not undo. The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed felt endless. Even now, while writing this, I can still feel the tension that filled my muscles. Fear became physical pain. My stomach twisted so hard I felt sick. It was not only terror. There was guilt inside it, too, for reasons I still do not understand. A deep, awful guilt, like I had done something unforgivable, like I had murdered someone helpless and forgotten it until that moment. And near my face, almost touching me, I felt a presence begging to be noticed. Not speaking, not moving, just waiting for me to sense it. Then the footsteps began again, extremely loud at first, then very loud, then only loud, then softer, near the doorway, then echoing in the hall. Slowly, the terrible pressure faded. The silence came back, but this time it felt safe. Empty, normal, I waited a long time before opening my eyes. It was a stupid decision, but I did it. The room looked exactly the same as before, except for one thing. The door, which I had locked myself, was wide open. I stood there for several minutes, staring at it. The hallway outside was empty. No hotel worker, no guest, no person walking away. Just the bright carpeted corridor and the quiet hum of the building. The t-shirt lay on the floor near my feet. I had not finished putting it on. I am sure that is why I am alive. I know how this sounds. I know what people will say. They will say stress broke me. They will say loneliness and obsession made me hear things. They will say the door was never locked, or that hotel staff came in and I panicked. Let them say it. I know what happened. Something came into my room. Something answered the entry, and I did not look at it. That may be the only reason I can write this now. I should stop. I know that. A sensible person would leave the hotel, go home, call their family, and try to rebuild whatever life they still had. A sensible person would never repeat the experiment. But I am not sensible anymore. I want to do it again. As terrifying as it was, it gave me something I have never felt in my boring life. A rush so pure and violent that everything before it feels fake. For a moment, I stood at the edge of something real, something enormous, something the world ignores because it hides inside the smallest movements we make. Call me a fool. Call me insane. I do not care. Next time, I will bring recording equipment, cameras, audio devices, sensors if I can find them. I need to know whether technology can capture it. I need proof, not just for myself, but for everyone. The theory is real. I know that now. And if I can prove it, the world will have to know too. Maybe I will be remembered for this. Maybe that is what I wanted all along. I am going to prepare another session tonight. I will choose a different action. Something simple, something forgettable, something with just enough fear attached to it. I will keep the lights low. I will keep my eyes open until the moment I should not. And if the entry opens again, I will be ready. Wish me luck. Story 6. This is my first time sharing this anywhere, and I know it probably sounds like the kind of story someone would make up for attention. I understand that. If I heard it from someone else, I would probably think they were exaggerating or turning a normal moment into something creepy. But this really happened to me, and even now, 2 or 3 years later, I still think about it more than I want to admit. The strangest part is that I had heard a story like this before. Not in real life, though. It was one of those internet creepy stories people pass around. The kind that feels fake, but still sticks in your head. That is why this bothered me so much when it happened. I kept asking myself if my brain had somehow taken something I had read online and turned it into a real memory. Maybe I got scared and filled in the blanks. Maybe I saw something normal, and my mind made it worse. But I remember it too clearly. I remember the store. I remember the bathroom. I remember the smell of the place, the sound of the lights, and the way my body went cold when I looked down and saw those boots. At the time, I was living in South Florida, around the Fort Lauderdale and Plantation area. It was late at night, sometime after 9 p.m., but not so late that everything was closed. My mom and I were out running errands. It was one of those last-minute trips that was supposed to be quick, but somehow turned into a whole thing. My mom had something to return at Ross, and if you know how moms are with returns and receipts, you already know there was no talking her out of it. I did not want to go inside. I remember sitting in the car and telling her I would just wait there. I was tired, and I did not feel like walking around a store that was close to closing. But my mom did not like the idea of me sitting alone in the car at night, even in a busy shopping plaza. She told me to come in with her. I knew she was right, so I got out and followed her inside. The store felt exactly like Ross always feels near closing time. Too bright, a little messy, with clothes hanging where they did not belong and random shoes sitting in the wrong aisles. There was one employee near the front, maybe two somewhere in the store, but I only clearly remember seeing one at first. There were a few customers in line, maybe 4 people, but each one had a cart full of stuff. It was obvious the line was going to take a while. My mom went to handle her return, and I immediately felt bored. I did not want to stand there doing nothing, and I knew she might be a while. I had my weed pen with me at the time. Back then, I used it every day, so 1 or 2 hits did not do much to me. It would just relax me a little. I am not proud of taking it into a store bathroom, but I am being honest about what happened. I decided to go to the bathroom. At that Ross, the bathrooms were near the dressing rooms. You could not just walk in on your own. You had to ask an employee to unlock the area or give you the code. I walked over there and saw an employee organizing clothes on the racks nearby. They looked like they were getting ready to finish their shift, just moving things around and straightening up before closing. I asked if they could unlock the bathroom. They pressed the button, and I heard the buzzer go off. I walked through the dressing room area and down the short hallway toward the women's bathroom. The place was quiet. Not empty store quiet, but close. The kind of quiet where every sound feels a little too sharp. My shoes on the floor. The hum of the overhead lights. The soft clink of hangers somewhere behind me. I reached the bathroom door, entered the code, and went inside. There was no one in there. That was the first thing I noticed, and at the time, it made me happy. I remember thinking, good, I have the place to myself. The bathroom was bright in that harsh way public bathrooms always are. White light, shiny floor, mirrors above the sinks, and the smell of cleaning spray mixed with that stale public restroom smell that never really goes away. There were a few stalls. I did not go into the large stall at the end because I wanted to sit down and relax for a few minutes without feeling like I was taking up the bigger one. So I went into the stall next to it, locked the door, and sat down. I used the bathroom, took 1 hit from my pen, and started scrolling on my phone. At first, everything felt normal. I was texting people, checking apps, just killing time while my mom finished. I knew she would call me when she was ready or when she got to the register. I did not want to be gone too long, but when you are sitting on your phone, time disappears faster than you expect. Anyone who smokes or vapes probably understands that weird feeling. You think 5 minutes have passed, then you look at the time and realize it has been way longer. After a while, I checked my phone and saw that around 25 minutes had passed. I texted my mom and asked if she was at the register yet. She said no. I sighed because that meant she was still dealing with the return or still waiting in line. I stayed where I was for a few more minutes, scrolling and waiting. But then I started feeling uncomfortable, not scared yet, just aware that I had been sitting in a store bathroom for too long. It was late. The store was getting closer to closing. I did not want an employee knocking or wondering why I was still in there. I decided it was time to go back. That was when I saw them. At first, it was just something in the corner of my eye. A dark shape low to the floor, under the wall of the stall beside me. I looked down without really thinking about it. There was a pair of black boots facing my stall. Pointed black boots. The pointed toes were aimed directly toward me, so close that the tips almost seemed to be under my stall wall. My heart dropped. It was not a normal kind of surprise. It was not like hearing someone walk in when you thought you were alone. It was deeper than that, like my body understood something before my mind did. Goosebumps rose across my arms. My stomach tightened. The relaxed feeling from the pen vanished instantly. I felt completely sober. For a few seconds, I just stared. The boots were in the stall next to mine. They were very still, too still. Whoever was wearing them was standing there without shifting, without moving, without making a single sound. I live in Florida, and I know people can wear whatever they want, but pointed black boots are not something you see often in that kind of weather, especially in South Florida at night while shopping at Ross. They looked out of place in a way I cannot fully explain. Not impossible, just wrong, like seeing a heavy winter coat on someone at the beach. My first thought was that maybe it was an employee, but I had only seen one or two employees in the whole store. The one near the dressing rooms had been organizing racks when I went in. I had heard no one enter the bathroom after me. No door opening, no footsteps, no stall latch, no sound of clothing or bags. I looked up because some stupid horror-loving part of me expected to see a face peering over the stall wall. There was nothing there, thank God. But when I looked back down, the boots were still there, facing me, perfectly still. I sat frozen, staring at them. My phone was in my hand, but I did not know what to do with it. I did not want to make noise. I did not want to move. I kept waiting for the person to shift their weight or flush the toilet or cough or do literally anything that would prove they were a normal person using the bathroom. Nothing happened. The bathroom was dead silent, except for the buzzing fluorescent lights above me. That sound became so loud in my head. The thin electric hum filled the room, steady and sharp. I could hear my own breathing, too, and I tried to slow it down because I did not want whoever was in the next stall to know I was scared. I told myself to think rationally. Maybe the person had been in there before I came in. Maybe they were just standing there for some reason. Maybe they were sick. Maybe they were changing clothes. Maybe they were an employee checking something. Maybe they had headphones in and could not hear me. But none of those answers felt right. When I first walked in, the bathroom had felt empty. I had not seen feet under any stall. I had not heard a toilet flush. I had not felt another person there. I know that sounds weird, but you can usually feel when someone else is in a public bathroom. There is some sound, some movement, some small sign of life. There had been nothing. So how long had this person been there? Had they been standing in the stall the whole time? Had they come in after me without making a sound? Or had those boots just appeared? That was the thought I did not want to have. I checked the time again. 40 minutes had passed, maybe more. That made the fear worse. I had been in that bathroom for much longer than I realized. Long enough that if someone had been standing in the next stall the whole time, they had been standing there silently for a very long time, still facing me. I swallowed and tried to speak. Hello? My voice came out small and weak. No answer. I waited. Nothing. I said it again, a little louder. Hello? Still nothing. No movement. No breath. No shuffle of boots on tile. No nervous laugh. No annoyed voice telling me someone was in there. Just the lights humming above us. I felt trapped. The stall door was in front of me, and the boots were to my side. To leave, I would have to unlock my door, step out, and pass right by that stall. I imagined the person inside suddenly opening their door as I walked past. I imagined a hand grabbing my arm. I imagined looking up and seeing no person at all, only those boots under an empty stall wall. I know that sounds dramatic, but in that moment, every awful possibility felt real. I stared at the boots for what felt like several minutes. They did not move once, not even a tiny shift. Most people cannot stand that still for that long. Even if you try, your body adjusts. Your feet move. Your knees bend. You sniff, breathe, scratch, check your phone, anything. This person did none of that. I finally decided I had to leave. I could not sit there all night, and I definitely did not want to wait until the store closed. My mom was still out there somewhere, probably thinking I was taking forever. I told myself to move fast, not run exactly, but fast enough that I would be out before anything could happen. I stood slowly. The boots stayed still. I pulled my pants up, grabbed my phone, and stared at the stall door. My hand shook as I reached for the lock. Before opening it, I looked down one last time. The boots were still facing my stall. Same position, same angle, same horrible stillness. I unlocked the door and stepped out quickly. I did not look toward the next stall. I did not wash my hands. I know that is gross, but I did not care. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to get out of that bathroom. I walked to the door, pushed it open, and moved down the hallway toward the dressing room area. The employee who had been organizing the racks was gone. That made my chest tighten again. If that employee had been there, I might have told them right away. I might have asked them to check the bathroom. But the area was empty. The racks stood there quietly under the lights, full of clothes no one was looking at. The whole back section of the store felt abandoned. I glanced back once toward the bathroom hallway. No one came out. I kept walking. When I reached the main part of the store, I saw my mom near the front. She was finally about to go to the register. I went straight to her, probably looking pale and scared, because she immediately asked what was wrong. I tried to explain, but I kept looking around the store while I talked. I was searching for those boots. I looked at every customer I could see. I checked the line. I checked the aisles near the front. I looked toward the doors, expecting someone in black pointed boots to walk out of the bathroom area and pass by like nothing had happened. No one did. The store was almost empty now. A few customers were still in line. The front employee was there. My mom was annoyed because I looked shaken and kept interrupting myself. I told her there had been someone in the bathroom stall next to me, just standing there silently, facing me. I told her about the boots. I told her I had said hello and no one answered. My mom brushed it off. She said maybe it was another customer. Maybe someone was feeling sick. Maybe I had gotten myself worked up because I was sitting in the bathroom too long. She was not being mean, but she clearly did not think it was as serious as I did. I wanted to believe her. Honestly, I did. But I could not get past the silence. I could not get past the way those boots were facing my stall. I could not get past the fact that I had heard no one enter, no one move, and no one leave. When we got to the car, I told her again. I explained every detail, hoping that if I said it better, she would understand why it felt so wrong. She listened, but I could tell she still thought it was probably nothing. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe someone was in there before me, standing completely still for 40 minutes, for some normal reason I will never know. Maybe they were an employee with strange shoes. Maybe they were a customer who did not want to talk. Maybe I was more affected by the pen than I thought, and my sense of time was off. I have told myself all of that, but none of it feels right. Because I remember the bathroom being empty when I walked in. I remember the way the air felt before I saw the boots. I remember the cold shock that went through me when I realized the pointed toes were aimed directly at my stall. I remember the silence after I said hello, and most of all, I remember those boots. They were too still. That is the part that stays with me. Not just that someone was there, not just that they did not answer. It was the stillness. It felt like I was looking at something that was pretending to be a person, but had forgotten people are supposed to move. I have not had anything that strange happen to me since. But every time I go into a public bathroom now, especially late at night, I look under the stalls first. And if I ever see a pair of black pointed boots facing me again, I will not wait around long enough to say hello. Story 7. Back in the 1990s, I was just an ordinary teenager with an ordinary life. Nothing about me was special. I was not popular, I was not brave, and I was not the kind of kid people remembered for any good reason. I was quiet most of the time, a little awkward, and obsessed with horror movies in the way a lot of lonely kids were back then. My last year of middle school had just ended, and summer break had finally started. It should have felt like freedom. No homework, no teachers, no early mornings, just long hot days, late nights, junk food, music, and movies. But that summer started with a bad taste in my mouth, because most of the people I had called my friends had suddenly stopped talking to me. To this day, I still do not fully understand why. One day, we were hanging out like normal, and the next, they acted like I was a joke they were tired of. The only friend I really had left was Mark. That is not his real name, but it is what I will call him here. Mark and I had always been close, mostly because we liked the same strange things. We both loved horror movies, creepy stories, weird tapes, urban legends, and anything that felt like it belonged in a dark room after midnight. We were the kind of kids who would rent the worst low-budget horror movie at the video store just because the cover looked scary. On the last day of school, I was walking home alone with my Walkman clipped to my belt, listening to Sailing the Seas of Cheese and trying not to think about the fact that summer already felt lonely. The sun was warm, the sidewalks were cracked, and everything had that slow, dusty feeling small towns get in June. Then, Mark came running up behind me. He was holding a VH tape. There was no case, no label, nothing written on the side. Just a plain black tape, worn at the corners and dusty enough to look like it had been sitting in someone's garage for years. "We have to watch this tonight," he said, grinning like he had found buried treasure. "I swear, this is the one." I took off my headphones and looked at the tape. "What is it?" "No idea," he said. I found it at a yard sale. No label, no case, just the tape. It looked creepy enough that I bought it. That was all he needed to say. We both had a weakness for things like that. A mysterious tape with no label was exactly the kind of thing we would have made up if we were trying to scare ourselves. Since Mark did not have a VCR at his house, we decided he would come over later that night and we would watch it in my room. My bedroom was in the basement. I loved that room because it felt separate from the rest of the house. My parents slept upstairs on the second floor, so at night I could watch movies, listen to music, and talk with friends without them hearing much. The room had a small window that faced the backyard, and Mark always used it whenever he stayed over. Instead of ringing the doorbell and dealing with my parents, he would just knock on the glass, and I would let him in. That evening, after dinner, I was sitting in my beanbag chair, waiting for him. The VCR was ready. The TV was on. I had already dimmed the lights because I wanted the room to feel like a theater. I was hoping the tape would be something genuinely scary, something we could talk about for years. A little after sunset, I heard the familiar knock on my basement window. I pulled the curtain back and saw Mark crouched outside with the VH tape still in his hand. I unlocked the window, slid it open, and helped him climb inside. He dropped down onto the carpet, brushed dirt off his jeans, and held up the tape. "I haven't watched it yet," he said as he walked to the VCR. "I figured we should experience it together." We sat down, expecting the scariest thing we had ever seen. The tape began with words on the screen. Knock, knock, knock. The letters were white against the black background, slightly shaky, like they had been copied too many times. My first thought was that Mark had tricked me into watching some terrible old movie he already knew was bad. I looked over at him, but he seemed just as curious as I was. The movie was black and white, and looked like it had been made sometime in the 1960s, though even then it seemed cheap. It followed a man named Joseph and his wife, Josephine. They were staying in a cabin deep in the woods. At first, it was slow and boring. They argued about the cabin. They talked about strange noises outside. Then, they found an old, dusty book hidden under the floorboards, and once they opened it, everything started going wrong. There were strange knocks at the door. Shadows moved behind windows. Josephine heard whispers when she was alone. Joseph began acting different, like something in the book was speaking only to him. It should have been scary, but the acting was so bad that Mark and I kept laughing. The effects were cheap, the dialogue was stiff, and the whole thing felt like every horror cliché thrown into one movie. By the time it ended, neither of us was impressed. It was around 8:30 p.m. When the credits finished, if they could even be called credits, the tape just faded to black after a final shot of the cabin door slowly opening by itself. Since school had just ended for summer, we asked our parents if Mark could stay the night. My parents were pretty relaxed about that kind of thing, so they agreed. A little while later, my dad handed me $50 and told us to walk to the grocery store across town to pick up snacks. He said if we were going to stay up all night watching movies, we might as well feed ourselves. At that age, we were not about to turn down free money. Before leaving, we made sure every door was locked and every window was shut. I remember doing that clearly because my mother had always been strict about it. The basement window was closed and locked. The back door was locked. The front door was locked. Everything was secure. The walk to the store was mostly normal. The sky had gone dark, but it was still early enough that a few people were outside. We passed houses with glowing windows, parked cars, and the usual quiet lawns of our small town. At one point, we ran into one of my former friends. He was one of the kids who had started bullying me near the end of the school year. He saw us and made some comment under his breath, but we ignored him. His mother had died in a car accident not long before, and even though he had been awful to us, we still felt bad for him. We did not want to fight with him that night. Inside the grocery store, we grabbed frozen pizzas, chips, candies, soda, and anything else that looked good. It felt like the official start of summer, and for a while, the strange tape was already fading from my mind. Then we got to the register. The cashier was not the man who usually worked there. That might not sound strange if you live in a city, but we lived in a small town. That store had one regular employee, at least during the hours we usually went there. Everyone knew him. Seeing someone else behind the counter was enough to make both of us pause. The new cashier noticed our faces and smiled. "I'm just the new employee," he said. Mark and I looked at each other and laughed it off. We were horror movie kids. We wanted things to be weird. Part of us probably hoped something strange was happening, because that would make the night more exciting. We paid for the snacks and headed home. On the way back, we passed a missing person flyer taped to a telephone pole. The name on it was Joseph Smith. Below that, in large letters, it said missing. There was a phone number at the bottom, but most of it had been scratched or faded until it was hard to read. I stopped walking. The man's face bothered me. It was not exactly that I recognized him. It was more like my brain was trying to connect him to something, but the answer kept slipping away. He looked familiar in a way that made me uncomfortable. I stared at the picture for a few seconds, trying to place him. "You coming?" Mark called from a few steps ahead. "Yeah," I said. I pulled my eyes away from the flyer and followed him. I told myself it was probably someone I had seen around town once or twice. In a small place, everybody looked a little familiar eventually. But the feeling stayed with me. By then, it was around 9:00 p.m., and the streets were darker. The store was not far from my house, maybe a 15-minute walk on a normal night. We took the usual route at first, carrying the grocery bags and talking about what movie we should watch next. Then we saw the van. It was parked in the middle of the road up ahead, not on the side, not in a driveway, right in the middle of the street. It was old, dark-colored, and still. No lights, no one standing around it, no engine sound. Nothing, it looked abandoned, but in a way that felt placed there. Mark and I stopped walking. We had watched enough horror movies to know what that looked like. Two kids walking down an empty road at night, an old van blocking the way, no one around. Maybe it was nothing, but we were not brave enough or stupid enough to walk right past it. So we cut through the woods. The woods ran behind some of the houses and would bring us out near my backyard if we followed the right direction. We had taken that shortcut before during the day. At night, it was different. The trees blocked most of the sky, and the ground was uneven beneath our shoes. We walked quickly, trying not to trip over roots. For a while, everything was quiet. Then, just as we could see my house through the trees, we heard footsteps behind us. Someone was running. Not walking. Not stumbling. Running straight toward us. We did not look back. We both broke into a sprint. The grocery bags swung in our hands. Branches slapped against us as we pushed through the last stretch of trees and burst into my backyard. We ran onto the porch, and I fumbled with my keys so badly I almost dropped them. The footsteps were still coming. I got the door unlocked, shoved it open, and we stumbled inside. The second I slammed it shut, something hit the other side. Bang! The whole door shook. Mark and I froze for half a second. Then we ran. We did not wait to find out who or what had followed us. We ran straight downstairs to my room, carrying the bags with us, breathless and terrified. The lights in my room were still on, but the room had been destroyed. Drawers were pulled open and emptied across the floor. Clothes were everywhere. My tapes had been knocked off the shelf. My beanbag chair was flipped over. The TV was still on, showing a blank blue screen. One of the windows was wide open, the basement window, the same one we had locked before leaving. My first thought was that someone had broken in while we were gone, but whoever did it had not taken anything obvious. They had not stolen the TV, the VCR, or the money left on my desk. They had just trashed the room. Then, Mark noticed something on the floor. It was a piece of paper. He picked it up, and I knew what it was before he turned it over. It was the same missing person flyer we had seen outside the store. The photo of Joseph Smith stared up at us from the paper. But now someone had written across it in thick black marker, "Oh, we swear this is the one." Underneath that were 2 letters. J&J, my blood went cold. The words were almost exactly what Mark had said earlier when he showed me the tape. I swear this is the one. Nobody else should have known that. Nobody else had been there when he said it. We ran upstairs to tell my parents. They did not believe us. To them, it looked like 2 teenagers had gone out, come home, trashed a bedroom, and made up a story to get out of trouble. The missing flyer did not help. The open window did not help. The fact that we were scared out of our minds did not help either. My parents yelled at me for destroying the room. They sent Mark home and grounded me for the beginning of summer. No matter how much we tried to explain the van, the footsteps, the door, the open window, and the note, they refused to believe any of it. But Mark and I knew what happened. We never forgot that night. For years, we talked about it every now and then, usually late at night when one of us felt brave enough to bring it up. We tried to make sense of it. We wondered who had followed us. We wondered how the flyer got into my room. We wondered if the tape had somehow been connected to it all. But there was never an answer. Life moved on because life always does, even after something impossible. Mark and I stayed friends for a while, but eventually we drifted apart. By the late 2000s, we had mostly lost touch. There was no big fight, no dramatic ending. We just got older, moved into different lives, and stopped calling as often. Then we stopped calling at all. Last week, I got a phone call from Mark's wife. Mark had died. The news hit me harder than I expected. Even though we had not been close in years, he had been part of one of the strangest and most important memories of my life. He was the only other person who knew what really happened that night. With him gone, it felt like half the truth had been buried before the funeral even happened. Today, I went to say goodbye to him. The service was quiet. His wife looked exhausted. His family cried softly. I stood there feeling like a stranger and an old friend at the same time. After the service, we gathered at the cemetery and watched as his coffin was lowered into the ground. That was when I noticed a gravestone nearby. The names carved into it seemed strangely familiar. At first, I could not place them. Then my chest tightened. I turned to Mark's wife and pointed toward the grave. "Sorry, who were they?" She looked over. "Oh," she said, "those were Mark's cousins. Joseph and his wife, Josephine." For a moment, I could not move. I slowly turned back to the gravestone and read the names. Joseph Smith. Josephine Smith. My body went cold from head to toe. Mark's wife noticed the look on my face and asked if I was okay. Before I could answer, she added something that made the whole world seem to tilt. They were murdered in a cabin in the woods back in the 80s. I could not breathe. Everything came back at once. The tape. The black and white movie. Joseph and Josephine in the cabin. The missing flyer. The van. The footsteps behind us. The bang against the door. The open basement window. The words written in marker. "Oh, we swear this is the one. J&J. I do not remember much after that. Someone helped me sit down. Someone asked if I needed water. At some point, someone drove me home. Now I am sitting alone in my cold house, trying to understand what happened all those years ago. I know how insane it sounds. I know nobody in my life would believe me if I told them the full story. They would say grief is making old memories feel bigger than they were. They would say Mark's death shook me up, and now I am connecting things that do not belong together. Maybe they would be right to think that, but I know what I saw. I know Mark saw it too. And now I know the names in that movie were not random. I keep thinking about that tape. I do not know what happened to it. I do not remember if my parents threw it away, if Mark took it home, or if it disappeared with everything else that night. I keep wondering where Mark really found it. I keep wondering if it was ever meant for him, or if it was meant for both of us. Mostly I keep thinking about the first words on the screen. Knock, 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 because ever since I came home from the funeral, I have been hearing something at the window. Not loud, not constant. Just a soft knock every now and then, coming from the back of the house. The same rhythm each time. 3 taps. I do not think there will be an update. But if there is, I hope I am still alive to write it.